Hi, everybody. I hope you're well. Welcome back. This is segment 3, Speak the Speech, or the Height of Language. So I would like to always start with a little bit of a review. We started out with prose and verse, and then we went into verbal conceits, wordsmithing, wordplay, verbal relish, repartee, wit, whatever you want to call it. And we did that by finding first the repetitions through consonants, then the repetitions through vowels and diphthongs. We said the consonants bring out the intellect, the vowels and diphthongs bring out the emotions. Then we looked for the different spellings, and we found where Shakespeare would elongate a word and saying putting an E on the end of the word was holding it just out a little bit longer, or if you're a musician, it was a dotted note. And then we looked at capitalizations. So today we're going to go further into first folio technique. And remember what I said, that technique gives you a key and lets you open doors and make choices and make discoveries that people that do not have the technique do not see. So today we're going to start with Mr. Hamlet and speak the speech. The first thing that he's saying is, "Speak this speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue." This line has lots of repetitions. Spa, spa, ipa, ipa, ta, 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 right? So that's what we would call complex. Complex does not mean hard, difficult, negative. It means rich, full, lots of things to do. So there's many, 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 many things. I'm going to tell you what I think that this means. And I do think that you're smart if you, with all of Shakespeare's speeches, is that you write it down in your own words. And so for me, what this first line means is, whatever I give you, make the thought clear. It's about clarity. We learned that this is prose, and we learned capital words. So speak has an E on it. Speech is capitalized. I pray you, I pronounced. So it's ipa, ipa. And then it too, you trippingly on the tongue. Tongue is capitalized. It ends in a T, and to begins with a T. When Shakespeare does this, it's known as a separation. So you have to say it to you, trippingly on the tongue. The same way that Richard III says, "This glorious son of York." There is no glorious son. There is no it too. It too is a little character in Star Wars. So Portia in Julius Caesar says, "Is Brutus sick?" There is no Brutus sick. You don't make it one word. You have to make it two words. And what happens is what comes after the separation is emphasized. And then tongue is capitalized. And again, I think he's playing with this group of actors who should, by this point, know how to speak very well. Next line. "But if you mouth it, as many of your players do, I had as lief the town crier had spoke my lines." I think he's literally playing with the actors and he's mouthing it. He's going, "But if you mouth it, as many of your players do." And he's teasing them. And then I think he picks on the newest actor in the group and he goes, "As many of your players do." He picks on this one guy, right? "I had as lief the town crier had spoke my lines." So maybe some of you have never heard the word lief. It's L-I-E-F, but just to keep your knickers twisted, Shakespeare spells it also L-I-E-V-E, and then to really twist your knickers, L-I-V-E, which looks like live or live. But most of the time it's L-I-E-F, and it means soon as or rather. I had as rather the town crier had spoke my lines. Town crier is capitalized, right? And again, who is the town crier? He's someone who talks loudly. But I think it's more than that. Shakespeare's father had a large number of different jobs. Nobody knows why, but one of them was a town crier. So maybe he's, again, relating to his father, who I think he loved dearly. Had spoke my lines is capitalized. Then he says, "Nor do not saw the air too much your hand thus, but use all gently." So when I do it in class, people just read the line, and I'm going, but it's a stage direction. So if he tells you to saw the air, you have to saw the air. And remember we said prose could be more physical and prose could possibly have more comedy in it. So again, Hamlet could be teasing the actor saying you're directing airplanes, you're waving your hands way too much, right? And then when he used the words thus means a physical action. Saw the air too much, your hands thus, but use all gently. So he's going from something very physical to something very soft. And this is the next point in the height of language, is Shakespeare's always going to compare and contrast. So he's doing visceral and he's doing gentle, or he's doing something what we call dramatic and something lyric. And then he says, for in the very torrent tempest and, as I may say, the whirlwind of passion. As I may say is in parenthesis. And what you will learn is that parenthesis, when we get to punctuation, can mean an aside. And asides are done first to another actor on stage, then to the audience, and hardly ever to yourself. So again, I think he's picking on this new actor. And he goes, for in the very torrent tempest and, as I may say, the whirlwind of passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance that may give it smoothness. And smoothness is capitalized. So those are the words that he's stressing: torrent, tempest, whirlwind, passion, temperance, and smoothness. That's the first period. So there's 7.5 lines before a period. The period is a big piece of punctuation, and it means it's the end of a thought. I'm going to show you the next handout, which is an end stop. It begins with a capital and it ends with a period, exclamation mark, or question mark. He's saying that's the first beat. So that beat, that end stop, needs one verb, one specific verb of what you're doing. How you build that end stop is through your repetitions, by saying it the second time because it sounded so good the first time and going up the ladder, and punctuation, which is a later segment. And then his next line is, oh, it offends me to the soul to see a robustious, periwig-pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ears of the groundlings. If you hear this line, it's what I would call bombast. It's pompous. It's a bad line. It's overwritten. And I think he did it on purpose. I think he says, if you overact, this is what you sound like. And he might have overacted it with his O's. Oh, it offends me to the soul to see a robustious, periwig-pated fellow, right? To do all this. And he could have just been having fun with these people because these actors probably did not speak that way. But he's saying to actors, if that's the way you talk, don't do it, right? It's bad. It's really bad. And then he says, who, for the most part, are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. Shows is spelled S-H-E-W-E-S. The English, if you read your Bernard Shaw, spells show with an E. I'm not a scholar and I don't know why. I just know they do it, but you wouldn't say shoe, right? Dumb shoes and noise. Shakespeare has many things that he uses in his technique, in the first folio technique, and one of them is prefixes. We're going to use en, in, and un. With these prefixes, what you have to understand is he knew his theater and he knew his audience. And his audience, they say sometimes 2,000, sometimes 2,500, sometimes 3,000. I'm not sure, but it could definitely, being at the Globe, hold over 1,000 people. What he understood was if the words were not stressed sometimes, is that by the third row you would lose it. So with en, in, un, it would be nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. He would hit the in. Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing says unmitigated rancor. If she says mitigated rancor and the audience hears that, it's totally different meaning. Margaret in Henry VI Part 3, She says, enforced thee, art thou king and wilt be forced? So she uses the en, Hamlet uses the in, and Beatrice uses the un. 99% of the time, Shakespeare uses this technique to stress the word and make a point. I'm now going to put in my philosophy for everything. You must always use your common sense. Remember, the only thing that Shakespeare does all the time is break the rules. So all of these technical things I talk about are good 99% of the time. But ask yourself, how does it sound? Does it make more sense? It will not always scan correctly. So you have to, again, use your common sense to make a point. I'm going to go back to Hamlet. And then Hamlet says, I could have such a fellow whipped for o'erdoing termagant. It out Herods Herod. Pray you avoid it. Termagant was a stock character in Roman plays who often screamed and yelled. So what has he been talking about so far in this speech? Speak the speech trippingly on the tongue, right? It offends me if you scream and if you mouth it, right? He's talking about these things. Then he gets into the second half and he says, be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action with this special observance. For me, this is the most important line. Because we're modern actors and we've all studied the Stanislavski method, whether it's Meisner or it's with Strasberg or whoever you've studied it with, and they've taken suit the action to the word to the action with this special observance, and they've made it mean verbs, which is great because verbs are action and we all need to play an action. We need to play the verb. I personally don't think that's what he was talking about. I think what he was talking about is more of what we've said, is find the M's, find the U's, use the consonants and the diphthongs to suit the action to the word to the action. And then he says, with this special observance. First of all, I want you to hear the separation, this special. If I took the word special out, no one would know. With this observance, suit the action to the word to the action with this observance. You could get away with that. So why did he put the word special in there? And I find that in the first folio, William Shakespeare used over 38,000 different words. The King James Bible, which is the other big book that existed at this time, only uses 8,000 different words. So I want you to know this man could have chosen any word he wanted or discarded any word he wanted, but he didn't. He chose special. And what I think it means is that it's focus. The special observance is you must look at what you're talking about because he talks in word pictures. When Brutus is talking to Cassius and it says, did not great Julius bleed? He has to be seeing the enactment in his eyes' imagination of Caesar being stabbed on the steps of the Lupercal, right? And that happened 20 minutes ago in the play, but he needs to see that picture. So I think it means focus. And then Brutus has, what shall one of us? And I think that's when he turns back to Cassius. That's the special observance. At least that's what I think. And I would ask you to think about it too. So he's given you all the things to do and all the things not to do. The last thing he says, and let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them. He had a famous clown named William Kemp, but Will Kemp would come out and bet the audience that he could make up a 14-line rhyming couplet sonnet. He was Shakespeare's great clown. He played Sir Toby Belch, Falstaff, Bottom, Dogberry. He played those roles, and he was known for going off and making it longer. So let your clown speak no more than is set down for them. I think that was for William Kemp. That is the best acting book that I think that you all can read, although I hope you read all the acting books that are out there. And Shakespeare's giving you a lot of clues, and he's giving you a lot of different kinds of language. So at this point, with the technique, we want to talk about what we call the height of language. If you have a line that says, "But look, the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon eastern hill." Nobody talks like that, okay? That's Horatio, right? So that's poetry. That's pure poetry. That's really elevated, and it's difficult and it's hard to understand. However, in Measure for Measure, that was Horatio and Hamlet. In Measure for Measure, Duke Vincentio says it's almost clear dawn, which is not as poetic as Horatio, but it's still poetic, right? And then this morning, I said to my wife, it's morning. So that's ordinary, that's common, right? So you can see the levels. So high poetry, middle poetry, and then ordinary, right? Poetic versus naturalistic is one of the things you must say to yourself on your checklist. Again, using Hamlet, and Hamlet says, there's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how you will. Again, it's very, very poetic. In The Winter's Tale, Leontes has a line that sounds naturalistic, but where it comes in the play, when he wakes up supposedly the statue of his dead wife, Hermione, and he has the simple line, "Oh, she's warm." Normally where the audience cries, but it is naturalistic and straightforward. Then I want to give you, again, an example of poetic and naturalistic. Hamlet, in Act 1, Scene 4, says, "The air bites shrewdly, it's very cold." So you have to say to yourself, why does he say the same thing twice? Why does he say one extremely poetic, and why does he say one extremely naturalistic? Horatio went to college with Hamlet, so he's capable of understanding poetry. So he says, "The air bites shrewdly," and Horatio would understand this. However, on the stage is also Bernardo. Where this Italian came from in Denmark, I'm not sure, but he's in the first couple of scenes. So I think he looks at Bernardo and goes, who's going, "What?" And he goes, "It's very cold." All right, and it can get a laugh. And I get a lot of laughs in Hamlet. Now, some people don't think you're supposed to, but I do. That's poetic versus naturalistic. And I need you to know when you're doing an elevated line, when you're doing a poetic line, when you're doing a naturalistic line, right? And that can happen in prose and verse. The next thing in technique I want to go over is when Shakespeare is being emphatic. If you say the word did, while, or may, those are simple, those are normal, that's every day. But if you say didst, whilst, mayst, those are heightened and emphatic. He puts the st on it for emphasis. It also, the st, makes you stop. If you have the word does, has, true, those are the simple. But if he says doth, hath, troth, or higher, tro, those are heightened and emphatic. The tro is the maximum heightened, right? So I want to give you two things to remember. Doth, D-O-T-H, is like you're going home and you're going to dust your furniture. Dust, doth. There is no doth. Do not doth anybody. They will laugh at you, right? And it's not troth. You take your horse to the trough to drink water. It's troth. Oh, troth. Please remember those and use them wisely. Some more that I'd like you to know about is please is simple, and we might all of us use the word please today. I pray you is heightened. I prithee is further up the chain of being. So it goes please, I pray you, I prithee. I want to take a second and talk about this chain of being because it's very important to the Brits and people in the British Isle. They do everything by the chain of being, class system, everything. Language especially. So the two famous woodcuts of the chain of being are, one of them is God at the top, and then he's sitting in a throne, and off of his armrest there's chains. The first chain is archangels, then angels, then king, queen, dukes, earls, viscounts, lords, regular people, animals, dirt, the devil. So it goes from God all the way down to the devil. The other famous woodcut is concentric circles, and on the outer circle is God, and then it goes all the way into the inner circle, which is the devil. Now that we've shown you the woodcuts of the chain of being, I'd like to put in the handout of titles because it coordinates exactly with the chain of being, starting at the top with the king's titles, Highness, Grace, Majesty, Sovereign, and then the lowest one is Sira. On the back, there's a diagram that shows you exactly what the word descriptions talk about on the front. So language goes up and down the chain of being. So please would be way far down. I pray you means you go up, and I prithee would be all the way up. Going up the chain of being, Shakespeare was saying to the actors, you need to emotionally go there. You need to find a reason why I'm giving you this heightened language. It's not just that something you just pull out of a hat. You're emotionally going up there. I also need you to know that prose, verse, rhyming couplets goes up the chain of being. You are responsible for all of this to put it together in your roadmap so that you can play your blueprint, your musical score, and you build the structure, because it has to have a solid foundation for you to do the final step. The final step segment will be Shakespeare to Stanislavski, and we'll talk about basic needs and basic doings. But to get there, I believe you have to build this structure, and this is how you build this structure. I said earlier that there's three kinds of language. Verbal language, which is the most important in plays, whereas if you're in TV and film, it's not. It's the silences. Just watch any movie and you'll see this. Physical body language, which Shakespeare loved to write in. Run, Orlando, run, right? And energy language. Energy language is the hardest to understand, but I can give you some clues. When Romeo says, but soft what light through yonder window breaks, the line is very poetic and soft and loving and lyric. If he screams it, right, it's the wrong energy. On the other hand, King Henry in Henry V, when he goes, cry havoc, right, he's doing a war cry, and that needs to be a higher energy. What I would encourage you all to think is that every word you must understand is a thought and action. And the words have a muscle in them. And the muscle can be big, right, and strong, or it can be small and weak and petite. It can be lyric and loving. It can be harsh. When we did the speech with Ariel in the 11-beat lines talking about feminine endings, she was talking about it, it was talking about a tempest, right? Again, what's the energy language in a tempest? In my book, Willpower, I talk a lot about volume, pitch, intonation, and inflection. And these are the things that give you vocal variety. You must know that Shakespeare was constantly saying, change your volume, your pitch, your intonation, your inflections, and that will give you the variety. The audience can basically hear the same note 3 times before they tune you out and they start reading their program. So you want to practice these things so that it becomes second nature and you don't ever have to think about it. With the height of language, there's certain words that I need to make you aware of. Words like troth, and then further up the chain of being tro. So Celia says, trow you who hath done this to Rosalind. Zoons, swoons, sblood. These are all heightened because what they meant was in the true wounds of our Lord. Remember, it was a very Christian society. And so they believed in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And all of those things were, if I was to contemporize them, it would be like when all of a sudden we go, Jesus. We say, we just use the God's name for some reason. But those words mean in the wounds of our Lord. Or if you just simply say, oh my God, right? That it's the same thing. Two more I want to talk about are I apostrophe faith, if faith, or Y apostrophe faith. The Gutenberg Printing Press, these printers, they sat at these A-frame tables, and they had these small lead frames, and they put it in letter by letter. And then they put it on a block, tightened it, inked it, and then the press came down with a piece of paper on it, and that's how the pages got printed. Many times they ran out of letters. They replaced the I with a Y, but it still means in the faith of our Lord's wounds, right? Or swear to God. I swear to God. It's the same thing if you do it in modern terms. Many actors say, well, I'm going to say in faith. If he's giving you it as a contraction, he's saying you're thinking so fast that you're dropping a letter. If faith, right? So you have if faith, cuz 'tis he. Celia's in a rush to say, yes, it's your boyfriend. It's Orlando. Contractions drop letters, and you cannot put letters back in to make it a whole word. The next thing in this segment that I'd like to talk about is folio oddities, because this whole technique is, again, being able to interpret the folio as a blueprint, as a musical score, as a roadmap. So many times you're going to see that I's and J's are interchangeable. So if it looks like it's I-O-V-E, actors assume, and they say, oh, it must mean love. But again, it's Jove. It's always Jove if it's I-O-V-E. He interchanges U's and V's. And again, they didn't have computers. So if they ran out of U's, they used V's. So if you see L-O-U-E, it's not I love you, it's I love you, right? So you have to just get with the program. S's and F's are also very interchangeable. So it's Isabella. I'm hoping that none of you would call her Ifabella, right? So what we said earlier, common sense, right? Use your common sense, or email me and I will always answer you, right? And some of the other oddities is if you use the word aisle, which in modern editions they will spell it I apostrophe L-L, but in the folio it's I-L-E. So you wouldn't say eel, you wouldn't say some word that makes no sense. Does in the folio can be D-O apostrophe S, but you wouldn't say do's, I do's you, right? Or D-O-E is the long version of do, right? It's got an E on the end of it. Sudden, S-O-D-A-I-N-E, but you wouldn't say Sodane. It's how they spelled sudden. They didn't have Webster's dictionary back then, right? So that's how they spelled it, how they thought it sounded. Pour was P-O-W-R-E, but you wouldn't power something, you have to pour it. For some reason, he always spells devil with two L's, D-I-V-E-L-L. So it's not devil, it's devil, right? And only is O-N-E-L-I-E. Don't say one lie, that's only. We talked about shoe for show. S-H-E-W is show. I can be also A-Y-E, and it can mean yes, or it can mean me. Because what we're going to learn is that his words many times have multiple meanings, like the word fair, right? Fair has multiple meanings. These are some of what we call the folio oddities, and you can look at these in your handout. But what I wanted you to get in this segment was, first of all, was what Shakespeare's telling you that he thinks you should do when you're acting the first folio technique or when you're acting Shakespeare. And again, the most important thing of everything is the humanity. Why these plays have lasted so long is the humanity. If I use Romeo and Juliet and the nurse and Juliet, and I love the nurse, and she has a scene with Juliet. Juliet comes out and she goes, "The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse." And so she's impatient. She's still a child. She hasn't made love yet. She becomes a woman when her and Romeo sleep together. The nurse comes back and she pretends she's out of breath, and then she takes the longest time to tell Juliet that Romeo's going to meet her at night tonight. Why? Why? And my feeling is what we're going to learn with when you say a word the second time as Shakespeare, we're going to do this in a later segment, wants you to physicalize it. Juliet's always going sweet nurse, good nurse, sweet, sweet nurse, honey nurse. She's doing all these terms of endearment. And then at the very end, the nurse says to Juliet, "You're going to be married, and now you're going to be with Romeo." And Juliet's so excited, and she runs away. And the nurse is left alone on stage. Well, what's the humanity in that scene? And I don't think that the nurse was being mean. I don't think that she was holding back. I think she wanted one more hug. I think this scene is about a hug, and it's that simple. The next segment, segment 4, I need my cheat sheet. We're going to deal with descriptive words, and we're going to use more Kate and Petruchio, and we're also going to use some contemporary scenes. And I hope that you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed my time with you, and I look forward to seeing you in segment 4. And to end, I'm going to give you this quote from William Shakespeare. "Ignorance is the curse of God. Knowledge is the wing wherewith we fly to heaven." Please take this information, use it, and work over and over for the rest of your life. See you next time.